Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to yet another video on the channel and our second wildcard video of the week. The first one got a great reaction. It's nearly on 1,000 views, but a few of you wanted to see one with both Haaland and Salah in it. And well, I'm always up for a challenge, and not only does this team come in at 92% rated, but it also costs exactly 100 mil, and that's if you were buying all the players from scratch as well. So hopefully everyone watching can still afford it. It also gives you 11 players for blank game week 29, so you don't have to use your free hit or any free transfers. Even if you're not wildcarding, hopefully it helps you out with your own transfer thoughts moving forward. And if it does, and you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. It is free and it really does help the channel grow. I genuinely do appreciate all the support. So let's get into it, and the main challenge of having a squad with both Salah and Haaland in it is trying to save funds on the players around them but still have a balanced squad. I've gone for Jorgensen in goal, who is pretty much the cheapest playing goalkeeper and has Leicester at home this game week, so he's fairly high up on the clean sheet potential. Throughout this video I'll also mention some more expensive options that you could invest in if you had some extra budget. And I do think keepers, because they have the lowest point scoring potential, I'd encourage you to put your money in elsewhere in your squad. But if you did want some more minute security over someone like Jorgensen, I think Raya is always a good shout, or even Jose Sa from Wolves is pretty much the same price at 4.3 mil and has Everton, Southampton, West Ham and Ipswich in the next four, so either of those options will also be good for your squad. I've gone for Kelleher as my backup on the bench. As I've mentioned previously, I think Liverpool have the potential to rotate in the league in the next few weeks, and there is a chance that he starts. You could always put him in your starting lineup, and then if he plays, that's great. You've got a Liverpool goalkeeper for 4 mil. If he doesn't play, then you'll get Jorgensen's points off the bench instead. So in defence, I've still found budget for one premium defender, which I do think is important at this stage of the season, just to increase the consistency of the points you get in. For me, Gabriel is ahead of Saliba for the attacking threat, but I also quite like Gvardiol for his attacking threat from Man City. Now, Man City do have a nice run, so you could actually save money here and go for him, but I do also think that Arsenal are better for clean sheets, and Man City can be a nightmare for the lack of them. The rest of the defence is understandably more of a budget setup, but I'd still think we have a potential diamond or two in there. Wan-Bissaka seems to be playing further forward for West Ham under Graham Potter, and he has 2 clean sheets and an assist in the last 2 games, and a fairly decent fixture run, to be honest. I can see them being one of those teams who finished the season strong, a bit like Crystal Palace last year. They were a bit more motivated towards the end of the season to improve, and they're probably playing a few teams who are maybe less motivated with not too much to play for. Can see West Ham getting some really good results towards the end of the season. I know Forest play Man City, but I still wanted Williams in the squad. I think if you can ride out that fixture, they actually have one of the best run-ins, including Ipswich in blank game week 29, which is a fantastic fixture to cover for any absent players in your squad. I was tempted by Kepa in goal, but I've made space for a Bournemouth defender instead. Huijsen is half a mil cheaper than his teammate Kerkez, so if you had the budget to upgrade, you could get Kerkez, but I think Huijsen's minutes are still guaranteed, and I'm not too sure Kerkez is worth the price difference for the potential points you get. I think I'd much rather invest that half mil further up the pitch. Bednarek rounds out the bench as my final bench player. He's always going to be in these wildcard teams because he is just the cheapest playing defender. So onto the midfield, and as you've probably guessed, it's no surprise, Salah is here. There's no point in selling him for the blank game week due to the value you'd lose when you want him back in the future. He'd also probably score more in 2 weeks than most players will in 3 anyway. I know there's talk of Liverpool rotating some players before the Champions League matches or during the Champions League sort of spell that they've got against PSG, but they have had just a week off with not being in the FA Cup, and they'll also want match practice. I think it's more likely that they start strong and then bring them off after an hour, because the league title is not settled. It's not done and dusted, so the last thing they would want to do is have a bit of a shock against Southampton. They'd look a little bit silly if that's the case. They'd much rather get the job done and then rest players afterwards. I've gone for the Bournemouth double up as well. I don't think it's necessarily needed to have 2 Bournemouth players in your midfield, but I want it to fit within budget and they're individually the best options. I think if you look at them separately and think you want them in, then I would just go for it. I wouldn't let the fact that they play for the same team stop you. I know Evan Nielsen is coming back from injury, but I doubt it will hurt their minutes too much. It's more likely to affect someone like Dango, who's been playing up front. They still have good fixtures with Spurs, Brentford, Ipswich and West Ham in the next 4. And I think for the price, there's not really anyone between that 5.5 mil, 6.5 mil bracket that could be better than either of them. If you did have extra budget, I actually don't mind someone like Bruno Fernandes from an attacking point of view, just because it doesn't seem to matter how Man United are doing. He usually just seems to get on the score sheet or at least get an assist. I think, admittedly, that is a bit of an expensive upgrade. It's like, 2 and a bit mil. For a lesser increase in price, I think someone like Johnson or Kulusevski are going under the radar a bit for Spurs. Spurs actually have quite a straightforward run into the end of the season, or as straightforward as it can get for Spurs. But I do think one of those, for a few million more, is a more likely option than someone like a Bruno. Like I said before, I think it's important to have some Man City representation in your squad. I think they'll be on a mission to get Champions League football, and Savinho actually has 8 returns in his last 8 games, and he's played at least 79 minutes in all of them, and then 89 minutes in 1, and then 90 minutes in 6 of those 8 games. So what I'm trying to say is he's getting consistent minutes, and we usually think of Man City as a squad that rotates quite a lot. That's not quite the case at the moment. They're actually quite a settled team, and I think someone like Savinho, I wouldn't worry about being rotated. Finishing the midfield, I'm sticking with Murphy from Newcastle, who was also in my other wildcard team video. I think now that Gordon is likely suspended for at least 2 league games, it'll only help his minutes case, and I think if you get him ahead of the double in game week 32, it's a really good time to make that move. He actually has more attacking returns than Gordon this season as well. So up front, we've got Haaland back in. If you ignore the price, he's got 9 attacking returns in his last 8 games, which is incredible. He's got 10 bonus points in that time as well. It's just the fact that he's so expensive, it distorts our expectations. I think if any player, if he was just priced a couple of million less and you look to those returns, you wouldn't hesitate to get him in. I think we've just got that thing in our heads now where he's so expensive, he needs to generate 2 goals a game in order to make him worth the price. And that's not really the case anymore because there's the lack of attacking options in FPL. I think it builds that case more and more to get Haaland in your team. He's also only 5 goals behind Salah, so I do think he'll have a personal aim to catch him and win that golden boot. Now, I've gone heavy in the attack here. I'm assuming you already own Isak in your team, which if that's the case, you need to hold him. He has great fixtures either side of the blank, and also the double coming up. You could see in the FA Cup that he's key to Newcastle's attack compared to the alternatives, and he's going to be on the pitch as well as they're also chasing Champions League football. These teams are going to be throwing everything into the league. And look who's rounding out the squad. It's Chris Wood. He's back again after a bit of an absence. And with Cunha suspended and Mateta likely out, I think he's fine to get in now. Even with the Man City game, you could still see him scoring. Like we said with Haaland, a lack of depth in the FPL forwards also means that he's a good pick to get in as he plays Ipswich in the blank game week 29, and then Man United, Villa, Everton, Spurs, Brentford, Palace, Leicester, West Ham and Chelsea. That takes him to the end of the season. Those teams concede goals for fun, so you can definitely see him scoring against them as well. So as we said at the start of the video, this team rating is 92%, which is awesome. I think it's got a really good balance. We've got the big hitters in Salah and Haaland. We've also got, not cheap players up front as well. So to get a 92 rated and have the balance with the team in defence, I think shows really good overall structure. The value is exactly 100 mil, which is a huge bonus, because it's a lot easier to have a cheap team and then spend the money on upgrades than it is to have a team that's too expensive and you're trying to cut costs somewhere and not necessarily get the players you want. I think I'd be happy for any of these players to be in my own team as it stands. So the strengths are that it has Haaland and Salah in it. You've got the 2 biggest hitters in FPL, 2 of the most consistent performers in the last couple of seasons, and it also gives you 11 players for the blank. And we're actually going to look in a second at how this team looks in blank game week 29. The weaknesses for me is that triple Bournemouth could be a weakness. They're a good team, but they are in the FA Cup quarterfinals, so that could distract them. And they're also one of those teams that can win 5 games in a row and lose 5 games in a row. And I just think you've just got to get them on the right turnaround. I think the fixtures they've got do lend itself quite well. And, you can also just sell a Semenyo to a cheaper, even a non-playing midfielder and upgrade elsewhere in the squad if you wanted some, more premium defender. You could save a mil there and just really go for a cheap bench. But I do quite like the Bournemouth options that they give. And the downside as well is that there's no real space for any other upgrades unless you either have extra budget in your squad or you make a bit of a sacrifice and, like we say, go for that cheaper bench. So this is how we're looking for Game Week 29 in terms of the blank. And yeah, we've got a lot of money on the bench, but I do think it's quite a well-balanced squad, one that's going to see you through. Like, I know it's a 5-back defence, which you never really see in FPL, but it's not like they've got difficult fixtures. Yeah, it's not great for Jorgensen in goal, Arsenal away, but Arsenal aren't scoring a load of goals. You've got Williams who plays Ipswich, even Bednarek plays Wolves at home, which won't have Cunha in. West Ham have Everton, who aren't known for scoring loads of goals, and then Bournemouth have Brentford at home, and Brentford's away record hasn't been that great this season. So I think in terms of clean sheet potential, it's still there. I think it's got good options for this game week. We've got the two Bournemouth midfielders playing Brentford. Now, obviously, if Brentford win 3-0, that's not going to be good. But you run that risk with any team in any week, really. Man City play Brighton at home, which is good. We've got another home fixture, and I think Brighton are the sort of team that can concede a few goals. And then Chris Wood plays Ipswich away, who are struggling to keep goals out. So I do think overall this team lends itself quite well to the blank game week. And as long as you've got 11 players, or even say 9 or 10 players, and they're good quality players, don't think there's too much to worry about for the blank game week. I do think people put a lot of emphasis into these games, and it's not like half the league aren't playing. You've got 4 teams that aren't playing. It's totally fine to just guide your own team through it. Maybe make 1 or 2 transfers to get 9 or 10 players out, and then you just go with it. So let me know what you think in the comments about this team. Are there any players that are missing? Are you wildcarding? Is there anyone that you think you should get in? Or any players that I've put in there that you don't really like? Go check out my other wildcard video, as well as my chip strategy video as well. If you've made it this far, go check those out. Hopefully they'll help you in with your own thoughts as well regarding the chips that you've got left. Keep an eye out for my Game Week 28 preview as well, that's coming out in a couple of days. Thank you very much for listening. Please do subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.